Hi, I'm Linda, and today I'm here to do a little discussion with you all, if you don't mind. Now, if you've seen the title of this video, you probably saw the question, why are there no FF books? This video isn't answering this question, but rather it's a video about why this question is being asked in the first place. Before I begin with my discussion, I want you to check out two other voices who have already spoken on this topic. The first one is Helen from Capricious Helen, and she actually made a video about this recently, and I will link it down below. And this video, she basically talks about the specific discussions and the frustrations of sapphic book content creators that have come up again and again as people keep asking this question. And the second one is a blog post from Charlotte titled "Why Do People Read What They Read?", which is like a very insightful discussion about why people tend to not pick up FF, or if they do, why they tend to rate it lower, which I highly recommend. But with that out of the way, I just want to address a few points. The question of why are there no FF books, or sometimes even why are there no good FF books, is a question that comes up a lot in the book community, especially on book Twitter. It will come up again and again. Every few months some rando will be like, why aren't there any FF books? And like, if you follow me, you know that FF books exist, they are plentiful, but this isn't a video about that. This is a video about the people who ask this question. I believe that the people who ask this question can be put into two groups. The first group is people who are actually interested in FF books, but just don't come across any in their daily lives. Or like maybe if they have the second question, maybe they read like Leon the Offbeat and they didn't like it. So they ask themselves, why aren't there any good FF books? And they genuinely want to see that representation, but they just can't find any. Well, if you are this kind of person, first of all, you have my sympathy. Like, I wholeheartedly feel for you. It is really hard to not have any representation in your reading, and even if you aren't sapphic yourself, I really appreciate a desire to seek out and find more representation. You are well-meaning, you genuinely see a need for more FF books, and you want more of it in your reading, and that is a good thing. Of course, if you follow even one sapphic book creator, you know that the question is complete and utter bullshit, and I say that with all the love in my heart. There are more FF books out there than I could possibly read in my life. There are too many FF books out there for me to put in a recommendation post. There are so many of them. There's hundreds and hundreds and thousands, and if I read nothing but FF books for the next few years, I would still have more to spare. This isn't hard to find either. If you just Google FF books, you'll just get lists upon lists upon lists. A lot of them. If you want more catered and specific recommendations, let me tell you about a few people that you should follow. Just here on YouTube, to keep it brief, even though there's even more on book blogs, book Instagram, book Twitter that I could also list. There's Nicole from Books and Waffles, there's Cece from Problems of a Book Nerd, there's Boston from Boston Reads Books, there's Alice Reads, there's Josie the Reading Wish, there's Unicorn Hunter Books, there's Ka from XO Reading Solace XO, and there's also Al from Yarn Al Reads. And all of these people read and review and recommend a lot of FF on their YouTube channels, and I think that all of them are very worthy of being checked out by you. So like, yeah. Also, if you want me to do one or even several videos recommending to you FF books, just comment down below and I will probably do that. But yeah, now that we've cleared up that there are just so many FF books out there, and so many good ones too, like, it's just impossible that there wouldn't be any good ones if there are really just so many out there. Let us examine the question of, like, if the statement of there are no FF books is such an obvious lie, why do so many people still believe it? And I think that's a really worthwhile question to ask. It comes down to marketing, really, and hype, and like what makes it into the mainstream. It is true that if you do not seek out specific recommendations and you only read what like is being put in front of you, what catches your interest based on the synopsis when you walk into a bookstore, and just blindly check any book out, and maybe like listen to a few of your friends' recommendations like the average reader would, you will mostly end up reading books by white men, maybe with a few white women peppered in there, and like one person of color. And that is just a fact, because that is how publishing, that is how bookstores tend to work. And like the mainstream and the main cultural communal like book recommendations pool tends to be very white, very straight, very male. Now, of course, if you're watching BookTube, you'll say, but the bookosphere, the book internet, is much more liberal than like the mainstream book world that basically just reads Stephen King and J.K. Rowling. If you follow like BookTube or are involved in the book sphere at all, you will find a different pool of books. If you just like read books that are repeatedly hyped, in order to like keep up with the community that a lot of popular booktubers recommend, that come up again and again, even with like the more like widespread readership that just seem to be really popular, you will end up reading mostly books by white women. A slightly higher percentage of people of color, and like with just a few exceptions, you will end up reading, in terms of romances, pretty much only MF and MM romances. These are just the kind of books that are being pushed into the mainstream on BookTube, Book Twitter, Book what have you. And yeah, this is just how it works if you're just like blindly reading, not keeping in mind diversity or representation at all, not putting in any effort to read diversely or support marginalized authors. If you just, you just read what catches your interest. You don't care about like what kind of romance there is, what race the author is. You're just reading what interests you, you know? And like, if this sounds at all familiar to you, congratulations, you've been around for a few years, because we have had this exact conversation 4 years ago when the big push for diversity happened. When we had hashtag we need diverse books, when we had hashtag own voices, first being pushed and created to get more like books by people of color and books that feature like just more diversity and like queer relationship into the mainstream. And like in that movement, you all know that we've made huge strides. But like back in the day when it was still new, it's really interesting, like about 3 years ago, as there were these first successes, which was like books like The Hate You Give being published and being really popular, and publishers like acquiring more diverse books, people also started to like respect respond to this development and this demand for more diversity with the statements like, "Oh, jolly, I wish there were more diverse books to read, but like there just aren't any." Or like, "Well, it's not my fault if the one book by a black author happened to be a book that I didn't like. Clearly it was bad, and therefore I don't have to read any diverse books because I tried. There just aren't enough out there for me to read. And if there are, they just aren't good. Like, I'm sorry, it's not my fault. I'm not racist." These kind of statements were making the rounds back then, you know? And it's like the exact same kind of argument that we're seeing now with FF books. And it's always been bullshit, and it's bullshit now. Like, that doesn't take a genius to decipher. It is like a kind of white guilt, you know? Back in the day, at least. It is, even now, it is an uncomfortable response of the privileged to having their privilege, like, pointed out. And it's basically like a desperate attempt to, like, explain away that privilege with something else, instead of, like, facing the bigotry that gives them an advantage over others. That's what it is, really. And that's the only reason why it's being said. So now, the good news is that this question is, and has always been, a response to success. Ironically, them asking why is there no FF means that FF representation is present enough for them to have to think about it in the first place. Publishers are acquiring more FF books than ever before, and it's only on the rise. Now, of course, a lot of people are not happy about this development at all, which leads us to group number 2 of people who ask this question. While the first group would be happy to discover, like, FF books and take recommendations, and might even pick up some of their own as they, like, slowly trickle into the mainstream. The second group is the group that says, "Oh no, there's no FF," but then they go, "New phone, who dis?" as soon as, like, somebody gives them any kind of racks at all. So what is their deal? Well, to put it bluntly, they don't want to read FF, and they're afraid that it will become expected of them by the community, just as reading more diversely has become more recently. FF doesn't exist, or if it does, then it isn't good, is at best an excuse, and at worst, it is an attempt to actively silence people who demand it. By repeating this blatant lie that it doesn't exist over and over again, they want to plant it into the minds of the average book consumer, so they aren't being held accountable if they don't read it. We as a community need to stop amplifying their voices. Because FF does exist. It's out there, and it's fucking good. Like, with any marginalized identity, the representation won't just fall into your lap from the sky. You need to work to seek it out. People in the community have campaigned to reduce that work, even managed to push some books into the mainstream. Girls of Paper and Fire, Wilder Girls, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. But ultimately, even though it's less work now, you'll have to put in work at all if you want to read diversely, and that doesn't only apply to books about queer women, but also for people of color, trans people, non-binary people, disabled people, etc., etc. Because the publishing industry operates under a white supremacist, cis heteropatriarchy. And until we dismantle that system, it will always be harder to listen to marginalized identities and marginalized voices. That is just a fact. But that just makes it even more important to do that work. So, if you're wondering why there isn't any FF, seek it out. Find it. Peace and goodbye.